welcome to the Cream of the Crop podcast. This is episode 1. I'm your host, Pam Montanez, and I am joined today in-house guest room computer office space with husband and lover, Joe Montanez. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Today, I don't know if I'm excited about this movie to talk about it, but we are going to talk about a movie, and that movie is Holmes and Watson. Okay, so my first question for you. Did you look up the Rotten Tomatoes rating already?
Yes, I did go into the movie knowing the Rotten Tomatoes rating, the Metacritic rating.
You did way too much research.
A couple of other significant rating sites, but I honestly didn't read any reviews. I just looked purely at the scores.
Okay, so you clearly know already then. This is an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes, I am familiar.
As some might call certified rotten.
Yes, it was very bad.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and, for our listeners, read a synopsis of this movie. So they kind of, if you haven't seen it, you know what it's about. The synopsis is: legendary detective Sherlock Holmes and his partner Dr. Watson return for a comedic take on their classic literary partnership as they use their incredible deductive minds to solve a mystery. So there's a synopsis. Main cast is Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly, Rebecca Hall, Rob Brydon, Kelly MacDonald, Ralph Fiennes, and Steve Coogan. So those are the main cast members.
A very star-studded cast.
Star-studded cast.
The who's who of British stars.
I love all of those people.
I mean, obviously, in John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell are American.
Oh, and also Hugh Laurie does like
Hugh Laurie, yep.
So I'm sure there's more, but those are. I just wanted to let y'all know the main cast there. It's rated PG-13. Director Ethan Coen.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I thought it was Ethan Coen of the Coen brothers.
I did too.
I questioned why the hell did he make this movie?
Yeah.
It wasn't until the end credits that I realized it was Ethan Coen.
Yep. Same thing. And I actually looked up Ethan. Yummy. Ethan Coen on Rotten Tomatoes, and his highest rated movie, Tropic Thunder.
Hey, that's a pretty funny one.
Lowest rated movie, Holmes and Watson.
Yeah, there's quite the spectrum there.
So, so that's where we are.
I doubt that Holmes and Watson will have the cultural significance that Tropic Thunder did. You walked out of Tropic Thunder. I mean, how long ago was Tropic Thunder made? At least 8 years ago. And people still quote that movie all the time. That will not be the case with Holmes and Watson.
And somehow, well, this podcast isn't about Tropic Thunder. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, final thing before we kind of get into some more open dialogue, I'm going to read to you the critics' consensus from Rotten Tomatoes, which it sounds like you already read.
I actually did not. I only purely looked at scores, the number score.
Okay, so the critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes: the lowest and vilest alleys in London do not present a more dreadful record of the adventures of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson than does Holmes and Watson. That was the critics' consensus.
That seems fairly accurate.
Okay. First question. Did this movie deserve 11%?
I am legitimately surprised that the rating is that high.
Wow. So, here's the thing. It's a comedy, and I feel like comedies, it's such a big spectrum. Why are you about to laugh at me?
Because this is fun. I'm enjoying recording the podcast with you.
So, I feel like it's a really hard thing to use the same scale to rate dramas and comedies, because the whole purpose of comedy, I actually get a little frustrated when a lot of people are so critical of comedy, because the whole point of comedy is to make people laugh, and then you're telling them they did a shitty job of it.
Well, I think you're touching on a larger issue here, and this has always been the main point of contention for real movie buffs in terms of the aggregate scoring of sites like Rotten Tomatoes, is that you have Oscar bait movies that are scored, based on a pass-fail rating, and, an Oscar-winning movie can get, a 79 or 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it can be incredible. And then you have like every fucking Marvel movie getting 100%, and those
See,
movies are not going
exactly.
to be winning Oscars.
Exactly. It's well, some of them. Black Panther, right?
Did it win an Oscar?
It was nominated.
I don't remember that.
And I think Batman, like the old Batman movies, have been nominated at some point.
Yeah, but here's the other thing: Black Panther wasn't a good movie in my opinion either.
Okay. Well, anyway, back to Holmes and Watson. I think it's really an objective thing to score. Is this a movie that I'll watch a million more times? No. Is it by any means my favorite Will Ferrell and John C. Riley movie? No. But do I feel like it deserved 11% for a comedy? I don't know.
I'm glad you're bringing that up because one of the things I took away from it, well, not one of the things I took away from it, one of the things I was asking myself um, is I feel like the comedy in this movie is so lowbrow that it is totally deserved of that low rating.
Okay. Well, and that brings us.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that moves into the next section. I guess is any movie highlights. Were there any scenes? Okay, and there probably will be spoilers if anyone cares that much.
Spoiler alert.
But what were your favorite moments of the movie? I'll start with one. So right at the beginning of the movie, uh, they do their first Sherlock Holmes ripoff where he does the calculations of like
Yeah,
move shoulder, account for squeak and floor, all this kind of
referencing
stuff.
the Robert Downey Jr. Jude Law Sherlock
Yeah,
movies,
yeah.
filmed
So
by, directed by Guy Ritchie.
they freeze frame it and they start mimicking that, and he ends up cracking this killer bee case. And none of that is what made me laugh. What made me laugh is that Dr. Watson's way to help with the situation was to start shooting bees with a gun. Like, I thought that was funny.
Um, I guess I didn't think it was that funny.
Just because it's like the most futile attempt to kill bees is to try to shoot a swarm of bees. Like, that's pretty funny. Anyway, that was the first thing that kind of stood out to me. Uh, what were some highlights?
Um, I think when he first meets, when Sherlock Holmes first meets the character of Millicent, we are introduced to her as a woman that has a disorder of being raised by feral cats, and so all of her actions mimic that of cats. I thought that was pretty funny when her character was first introduced. Um, but what I was going to say, I did find that scene in which he references kind of like the other Sherlock Holmes movies where he's contemplating break wrist, all that kind of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely funny the first time that it happened, but then every subsequent time that it happened after that was less and less funny.
Well, I disagree with that too because I think when he did it at the boxing ring, and he like everything hinges on getting the first move right and like distracting with his pipe, like, and then that doesn't work and it just all goes to hell. Like, I don't know. I think that's pretty funny. And then at the end, when he couldn't stop thinking about Millie, and then it like all failed too.
I guess.
I think it's funny concepts. Again, it's really subjective. You're going into this thinking, "Oh, this has got to be the best comedy ever," right? And then, it's just comedy.
When Will Ferrell first kind of came onto the scene, obviously moving from SNL into like big movie roles, he was kind of a part of that. What do they call them? The Brat Pack, I guess. I think that's what they called them. And there was
Okay.
a bunch of other actors, a bunch of big comedy actors in the Brat Pack. Um, that kind of comedy had never been seen before, and I think what he's trying to do, I mean, 20 years later, is still trying to carry over some of that comedy into movies now, and it is so slapstick and it is so over the top that I just think it's kind of played out.
Maybe it's not my favorite kind of comedy, but I still have to have appreciation for it because again, the whole reason I like to watch comedies is because life is stressful. I get so frustrated at anything happening in the world that like all we have is making people laugh to feel better. I don't know. I'm not a hater.
There were a few points of genuine laughter. I'll admit it. There were some other scenes that
Well, let's just call out one time that Joe laughed during this movie was when the character of Millie hands Will Ferrell a drawing of a cat. I don't know. I literally turned to Joe and I go, "This is where you're gonna laugh at this movie," and it was like 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah, I guess there were some. It was mainly her character that I thought had funny moments.
And talk about slapstick. I feel like her acting like a cat. That's got to be the most slapstick thing in the whole movie.
There are definitely more things I want to talk about, but I'm not sure I want to jump the gun. If you have other questions that we
Well,
want to
so
get into.
I was asking if there was some highlights for you. There was not, and now we move into lowlights. So, what were some moments
Yes,
you did not
the
like?
lowlights. I think the runtime for this movie is like just short of an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It is a long hour and a half. I again, it was just so over the top. Um, but there's obviously more wrong with it than there is right with it. I think some of the moments that fell most flat with me were the blatant attempts to poke fun at the current presidency. Um,
And what's funny about that is because you made a comment about that during the movie, and I didn't say anything because I knew we were going to talk about it. But out of reading, I read a lot of reviews in prep for this episode, and a lot of them were, uh, saying that just was the worst kind of humor, and like
absolutely.
that it just had no place in the movie. It ruined, like that's what ruined the
It
movie.
is the lowest hanging fruit possible. And this movie came out in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Not
It's
too
recent.
yeah, it's
It's
recent, but it's
recent.
not too long. It wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
Recent. But
So, for
those.
example, did you say what one of those jokes were?
Oh yeah, I mean, so again, hashtag spoiler alert. Um, Within the first 5 minutes of the movie, Will Ferrell's character Sherlock Holmes, uh, and I guess a running joke throughout the entirety of the movie is that he's struggling to find a hat that suits him. This is before
Which we all know how political hats are.
now
Always. Like cowboy
nowadays.
hats,
Well,
other hats.
so within the first few minutes of the movie, he's trying on hats, and he puts on a red hat that says "Make England Great Again." Obviously reminiscent or mimicking MAGA hats. And as soon as I saw it, I mean, I'm just like, come
I mean,
on,
yeah,
like
and
that's so
it's
dumb.
literally in the first like 15 minutes, and Joe turns to me and he's like, "Really, this is the worst kind of humor." I'm like, "Oh god!"
So there's more jokes like that. I mean,
Like
there's
like
literally
when
a
they're talking
whole
about how they don't, she could never live in a country that has a monarchy because in America you trust white men that are landowning to decide the future of our country.
something along those
Some
lines, but
yeah.
a 2 or 3 minute, maybe longer bit that is entirely about the current presidency.
And a lot of the reviews I read, I will say, felt conservative in nature as against these things. And I, knowing you personally, know that you are not a conservative guy, and you still hated this kind of humor. So I think
Yeah, like I said,
that was
it's low hanging fruit. It's so played out, you know. Um, well, and especially seeing it 6 months after it was released, we've had 6 more months of idiocracy in the White House. But we're not going to get into that. This
this
isn't
is
a
not a
political
political
podcast. We're trying to
podcast.
have fun on this show. Um,
Are you having fun?
I'm having a blast. But yeah,
Okay.
that was obvious, or that was for me the worst part of this movie was the repeated political humor,
jokes, yeah.
just because they fell extremely flat. It's
I
old.
guess I get for me. I mean, yeah, the humor we've already talked about that wasn't brand new witty humor that we've not seen before, not super clever. But I will say probably if I were to pick some jokes to be a hater on, it probably was those because it wasn't just political jokes; it was jokes that we've seen a million times already. And like slapstick, as much as you've seen it, if it catches you at the right moment, it can always feel fresh.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like even if it's just
Yeah,
goofy, like if it's set up well, it can still feel fresh. Like I just think about we just saw the long shot, and there was some slapsticky stuff there, but it felt fresh in the timing of
yeah,
everything.
yes,
So yeah, but I will say yeah, those jokes just felt like you've heard them a million times, and it wasn't
yeah. This
mine
this isn't
properly.
a plug for Long Shot, but
But it was a
well,
really good
and
movie.
we won't give any spoilers away on that one. But Longshot has Seth Rogen, also historically kind of another slapstick comedian actor. Um, but like you said, in Longshot, they're finding kind of new takes on that kind of humor. It's timing is everything.
I think timing is
They
everything.
play out
No matter
more.
how what like same the joke is, if it's timed right and unexpected, that's the whole I think thing about slapstick comedy that makes it funny is that it's suddenly unexpected and it shocks you into thinking it's funny or whatever. So I don't know. To me, that's what I think is funny about slapstick, and usually why I'm not drawn to it because it's pretty predictable. So,
Yeah.
um, any more lowlights that you want to talk about?
For such a star-studded cast, I mean, the characters were not really well developed, and I don't know. I'm critiquing it really hard because it was so bad. And you're right, it is a comedy. It's supposed to be lighthearted. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to make you forget about all the world's troubles. But this movie
It
did
still
not
kind of
do
sucked.
that. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Um,
Um. Okay.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's
I
all. That's
interrupted.
all I had.
Okay.
Did
I will say I forgot to mention in the highlight for me was John C. Riley singing.
Yeah, that's one of the
He's a wonderful
things.
singer. They sing a Broadway number. Actually, also another point on that when I was rewatching. So I watched this the first time, um, not knowing the rating actually, and then decided to start this podcast. Looked up the rating. I was like, perfect. Holmes and Watson will be episode 1. So then I was planning to have Joe watch this, and then we meet up to talk about it. But I ended up watching it a second time, which I will tell you, 2 times is a time too many to watch this movie. Um,
Yeah, I will never watch this again.
but I will say the second time through, I did pick up on a couple of things, and I thought the musical number was probably my favorite thing of the whole movie. And I almost feel like if the movie had been completely a musical, that it would have been funny.
If the movie would have been completely a musical, you would have had a hard time getting me to watch it.
True. Well, okay, yeah, any musical has some story to it, but I feel like that was the best part. I don't know how you would carry a story through that, but I feel like it could have been funnier if it was a musical.
Maybe. Going back to some of the other highlights,
You don't like musicals, so.
I could. I'm
John C. Riley had a beautiful voice,
well,
though.
and that's you had mentioned it while we were watching it, and I had remembered it from hearing it somewhere in the past. But wasn't he? He was a Broadway actor for a long time as well, and I think he still continues to do Broadway stuff. Um, so in that sense, I mean, I think that he plays really good dramatic roles in some of the other movies that he's been in. But yeah, I didn't think that it worked well in this. Uh,
Okay.
Real quick, another highlight for me. Spoiler alert. Maybe this was in the trailer. I don't know. I don't even think I saw the trailer for this movie. But this movie takes place, I guess, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They're trying to take a picture of themselves, and he pulls out what he calls a primitive. It's a primitive selfie stick. So it's a big box camera on a huge piece of lumber that they're hoisting out in front.
It's an old accordion camera on a
Yeah,
tripod.
exactly. Anyway, I thought that was funny, but I don't even think I laughed out loud at that point. I just thought that was clever.
Well, I think to be fair, I will say between the two of us, the loudest laughter that came out if I were to do a reenactment was like
Yeah.
I think that we're laughing louder now and we're not being funny than we did during the movie. Again, I'm not a hater. It's pleasant. I enjoyed it the first time, but
But
it was not laugh out loud funny for us.
the question you asked, does it deserve an 11%?
All right. Well, okay. So next key, then we talked about John C. Riley, but how did you think the acting was? Did you already say that you did not think the acting was good?
I think I'd said for and while we were talking just now, I was looking up. Is it Ralph Fiennes or Rafe Fiennes? I don't know.
I
It's
have
spelled
Ralph.
Ralph, but I feel for some reason I feel like it's not pronounced that, and I don't know.
We don't have a fact checker,
No
so
fact
we'll
checker,
never know.
but I
We'll
did
never
look
know.
up, some of the other movies that he's been in: Schindler's List, The English Patient,
I mean, he's an amazing.
Red Dragon,
I mean,
that of
think of
what's the name of which we will not speak. Voldemort.
well, yeah.
He plays such good characters, and you know.
I mean, you look down this list. Rebecca Hall. I mean, I looked her up too because I couldn't. I kept picturing this scene. She's in The Town. I
Yeah,
love The
yeah, great
Town.
movie.
Among other things, Hugh Laurie is a great actor. I mean, I love Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
hilarious.
I love Will Ferrell and John C.
Both
Riley.
of
I
the
mean,
Trip
they're both
movies.
into. Also,
Both of the Trip movies
Rebecca
are
Hall was
incredible.
in that other Will Ferrell, like more serious drama.
Oh yeah,
movie.
Everything Must Go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she was in that with
was great.
him. Yeah. So I mean, even Will Ferrell and John C. Riley can do serious or comedy. Like they're all good actors.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is I definitely think that the cast was underutilized in the way that the movie was written.
But I don't think the acting was lacking on it. I think it was more story and time.
Correct. It was writing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more writing than anything. Okay, well then we kind of went through the last part, which was story, which I think is what made this movie not great. Was the story
Very lackluster writing.
kind of generic?
Generic, cheap shots throughout.
Yeah.
Low hanging fruit, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so brings us to our next section of the show, which is I read a few standout reviews that I read, and then we can decide if they were accurate or not. So there's on Rotten Tomatoes they do critic reviews, and then they just do anybody reviews. So first one is a critic review. Barry Hertz says Holmes and Watson is bad. That's the whole review.
Which publication does he write for?
I didn't do that much research. I
Okay.
just got the name down. But that's his whole review on Rotten Tomatoes.
Holmes and
Agree
Watson
or disagree?
is bad.
Yeah.
Agree.
Agree. Okay. Next one, Joshua. Wow. Joshua Rothkopf. Rothkopf.
I don't know.
Here's what he says: if a comedy falls in the forest and nobody laughs, did it even exist?
Very philosophical.
So philosophical. And what do you think?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you one thing. I did not laugh.
Okay. All right. Next one. Rafer Guzman.
Man, these guys all have critic names.
They are so critical. This one says Holmes and Watson is one of those movies that goes beyond unfunny and into comedy cubist zone, where jokes are no longer recognizable and laughter is philosophically impossible.
A very deep review with many words that can be
Yes.
condensed to this movie was bad. Like our first critic.
This is so ridiculous to me is that people are critiquing it to this level when it's a freaking comedy.
Hey, if someone puts it out there, then it's going to get critiqued.
Yeah, but does not deserve that, I don't think. Okay, and this one, now we're moving into just anybody reviews. And this one had no name, or the name was no name. I don't remember. It says, the duo is feeling a little flat. The wife loved it, though. 1 star. Actually, it said, the wife loved it, thou. 1 star.
How did he spell it? Was it supposed to be loved it, though, THO, period?
Yeah, but he put a U on the end.
I'm going to go ahead and critique this critic and say, oh, wait, this is just a regular...
This is just a person.
Oh, okay. I'm going to forgive
duo
that
is
then.
feeling a little flat, ... The wife loved it, thou.
The wife loved it, thou. Maybe that was an attempt at using some of the verbiage that they would have used.
And I'm glad that he's like, you know what? My wife loved it. I'll give him 1 star. That's how I imagine that happening.
Yeah.
Okay. So next one, Greg M. In the name of all that is decent, do not watch this film. You will laugh exactly 0 times. You will writhe in your seat while your brain begs it to end. You will regret having seen a single minute of it. Do you feel that way?
I would have to agree with Greg M on this one.
You were writhing in pain in your seat, and you regretted every single minute you watched it.
Well, maybe not to that. Maybe not to that
that
extent, but like I said,
exactly.
So,
and you went like this a few times, okay?
No more than twice.
Maybe 3.
Pushing it.
So you can't really agree with that because I watched you watch
Okay.
this. Okay. The next one, Rated N is the name of the person, and this is the review. Emulates the 90s humor of Mel Brooks's work, meshing barbaric medicine, parody, and sexism with hastened aplomb. It's an overall enjoyable romp, although how Holmes comes to his ultimate conclusion at climax's edge remains the real mystery. 3.5 stars.
Wow.
So this was kind of a positive
Yeah.
review. 3.5 stars though, out of 5.
I mean, to each their own, but that's a pretty big jump to consider this in the same class as a Mel Brooks movie.
But if you were to go back and look at Mel Brooks's work and how slapstick that's what I'm saying. It's like,
but that was the first time people were seeing stuff like that.
that's true. That goes back to our point that timing means a lot, and you can do the same joke, but if it's set to new timing, it was really funny. So, I mean, I felt like that maybe was. Here's the thing: he put that as a review, which sounds very glorified, and then only gave it 3.5 stars.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't agree with it, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying the review and the star rating don't really go together.
Okay.
All right. And the final review is from someone named Sherlock H.
Ooh, very interesting.
And here is what Sherlock H has to say. This movie was absolutely amazing from start to finish. It was 1 hour and 29 minutes of pure comedic gold. Does not deserve the harsh ratings it is receiving, and would recommend to anyone seeking to see one of the greatest movies ever created. From the great jokes to heartfelt musical-like singing, Holmes and Watson deserves to be nominated for multiple Oscars and will most likely set a record in upcoming. Okay, so then, we've been through those things. Final thoughts. What rating would you give it? Would you stick with the 11%? Was Rotten Tomatoes fair? I think I would give this movie a 25%.
That's pretty high. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna give it lower than an 11%.
Okay.
Not much lower. I'm gonna give it a 10%. I know that it's only 1% lower, but it deserves every bit of that 10%.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Can you do the math for us? What's the average of 25 and 10?
Why did I get 187.5? I don't think I'm doing the math right.
So our collective Rotten Tomatoes rating.
17.5.
17.5, okay. Our collective Rotten Tomatoes, well, we're not Rotten Tomatoes. Our collective Cream of the Crap rating is 17.5%. You feel comfortable with that?
I'll let it slide this time.
All right. And there you have it. All of those reviews and other reviews and ratings can be found on RottenTomatoes.com. This is Cream of the Crap, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for having me on as your first guest. I really do appreciate it, and I will definitely look forward to listening to this podcast every episode in the future.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 1 of Cream of the Crap. If you know of movies rated 17% or below on Rotten Tomatoes that you want to hear me and some friends talk about, send them over. You can follow us on Instagram at ExtraWhip and comment or DM us those movies. Thanks again, and we'll see you on episode 2.